chapter 2 of Landing by Lovelash. And chapter 2 is called Training Tensions. On with the summary. Danny gets ready to start school at UA. Nezzy must assess his abilities. Danny wasn't scared. He told himself, promised himself, that much was true. That was a simple training session. A simple training session with someone that Aizawa trusted. If he could find it in himself to trust the underground hero and teacher, and he could find it in himself to trust the principal of the school that he worked at. But he was having a hard time doing so, for a few reasons. For one, Nezu was a stranger to him. He'd required it to be himself and Danny. That fact was not helping to settle his nerves. Second, Danny could read the energy flying off the small creature. While Aizawa was deep and caring and idealistic in nature, Nezu was spurred by wonder and curiosity, a dark need for knowledge. That was more than mildly concerning. Danny known people who were overcome with curiosity. He'd lived with two of them. He'd been cut open by more. So no, Danny wasn't scared. He'd keep telling himself that until it became true. He sat across a large mahogany desk, apart from Nezu, who had taken the first few moments to look Danny over with an almost hungry glance. Eyes greedy and searching for the answers to questions not yet asked. And leaned forward, paws resting on the wood as he smiled wide. Sharp canines poking through. "Hello, Danny. It's a pleasure to meet you." Nezu held out a confident paw, glancing down at it, and came back up to, glancing down at it, and then back up to Danny expectantly. Danny shook it tentatively, surprised by how soft the white fur was. When he pulled back, he nodded, looking away from Nezu. "Yeah, you too." "So, what exactly are you hoping to get out of our lessons?" Nezu's question came as a shock to Danny. His gaze snapped to his, brows furrowing instead of hardening. "I don't know." "There's nothing you'd like to know more about this dimension?" Nezu prodded. "No queries you haven't had the chance to have answered?" One question ran through Danny's mind as he bit his lower lip in anticipatory anxiety. How can I help the heroes? How can I help protect people without becoming a public enemy? Nezu's features were overcome with giddy at the question. "What a splendid question! What precisely is the rush to become a hero?" Danny shrugged, face flushing green as shame washed over him. He looked away, keenly aware of Nezu's investigative stare on him. "I need to help people, to protect people." "And why is that?" The question wasn't meant to be aggressive. Danny knew that. But he still bit out his answer. "None of your business." "Actually," Nezu's tone turned darker, more scathing and less curious, "it is." Danny looked back at the principal, eyes narrowing at the silent question. "As I put my reputation on the line to ensure you go unnoticed by the authorities, I need to know these details, especially if we're going to try to continue your vigilante work." "Try?" Danny spat the word. "Well, we will, of course, do anything we need to do to prevent you from breaking the law," Nezu elaborated. "The more attention you gain, the more danger you put yourself and Aizawa in." "I don't want any trouble," Danny relented, tones softening as he looked down at his lap. He fiddled with his fingers, a nervous habit he'd acquired recently. I don't even know where to begin. I need to protect people." "Let me guess. Nezzy spoke with an air of unbridled confidence. It has to do with your ghostly nature? Danny nodded, slow and solemn. He couldn't meet Nezzy's eyes. Yeah. His voice cracked despite himself. I won't touch you for your nature, Nezzy reassured, voice going soft. Danny looked back at him, eyes wide and pleading. I've been ostracized for people for being what I am. I would never do the same to anyone, especially someone with such a proclivity towards helping people. Okay. Danny swallowed hard, nodding and gripping the bottom of the hemline of his sweatshirt with shaky hand. Oh, alright. So you see, all ghosts have an obsession. It's what keeps them tethered to the ghost zone, tethered to reality. I'm not fully a ghost. I'm half of one. The thing that keeps my ghost half sane, what keeps me from losing it, it's my obsession. And your obsession is to protect others? Nezu deduced correctly. Danny nodded in response. I see. Certainly it is a noble obsession, but it begs the question, how do we keep you sane without breaking the law? Danny shrugged, the act tense and protective. Don't know. I'll think on it, Nezu decided. Until then, come to myself or Azala if you're struggling with an urge to act on your obsession, will you? Fine, Danny muttered, crossing his arms over his chest. The next order of business was to go to the now repaired training block and do a comprehensive exam of Danny's abilities. The training would start the following week after Nezu decided what he needed to focus on. The next week was the entrance exam for applicants who hadn't been selected already, and Danny couldn't help the rise of his curiosity considering the other prospective students. Upon entering the empty concrete cityscape, Nezu smiled somewhat reassuringly at Danny. Time to start? Whenever you're ready, of course. Danny nodded, taking a deep breath before transforming into his ghost form. He looked at Nezu, questioning gaze lingering. What first? Let's start with your base powers, Nezu suggested. Again, Danny offered him a firm nod. He turned to the nearest building, shooting a blast of radioactive green energy at it. The cement chipped away like wet paper, the attack leaving a pillar of dense gray smoke. He then erected a similarly glowing green shield, letting the energy of it wrap around him like a security blanket of sorts. With hands spread wide on either side, Danny turned into the air back to Nezu, his legs now a wisp of a tail. Very good. Nezu clapped excitedly. What next? Danny thought of how to explain his next ability without sounding completely evil. I can overshadow people, possess them. I don't like to do it, though. It kind of goes against everything I like to think that I'm about. Fair enough, Nezu hummed, though the glint in his eyes gleamed of unfulfilled want. He yearned to see Danny use that ability. The teen shuddered. How about your disappearing act I've heard so much about? Alright. Danny let himself go invisible, which wasn't hard given his current state of emotional turmoil. He reappeared a few short minutes later, right in front of Nezu. I can reach through solid objects, too. Without warning, Danny stuck his hand through Nezu's midsection, causing the furry creature to gasp. Incredible! Nezu looked down at the arm stuck in his stomach, gasping as Danny drew it back toward himself. It felt so cold. Very strange indeed. Yeah, everyone says that's what it feels like. Danny shrugged idly. I guess I wouldn't know. It all feels kind of normal to me now. And how long have you had these powers of yours? Nezu queried, the words tumbling faster than the previous steady tone. A few months, or I guess. How did you acquire them? Now Danny tensed, looking pointedly away from Nezu. Doesn't matter. Besides, you don't ask a ghost how they died. It's rude. Ah, Nezu breathed the syllable. You died. Well, while it is crucial, I know more about the event. That can wait for a later date. Let's move on to the next power. Well, one I kind of forget about. Danny looked back at Nezu, grateful expression flashing before he composed himself. Is my ghost speak? What is that? Nezu wondered aloud. I can understand and speak a few other languages, not artificial ones though. I found that out with Esperanto, speaking friend of mine. Danny cracked a small smile at Nezu's odd expression. But natural languages, yeah, I can speak those. So, you never studied Japanese? Nope. You're fluent. I sure am. Nezu nodded, laughing again in excitement. What else can you do? Well, Danny pondered his next words to ensure he was explaining himself properly. These next abilities are a little different than the others. They're more personalized, more specific to myself and very, very few other ghosts. I can try to duplicate myself. I can't quite do that yet. Please, do show me. Danny tried desperately to pull himself apart into twin versions of himself. After a few fruitless moments, his head snapped, and there were two of them connected to his single body. Gritting his teeth, he felt a tug at his core, deep but discomforting, before his twin heads pulled back into one. See, I can't get all the way yet. Very good use of the word yet, Nezu proclaimed with a single raised finger. I also have an ice core, so I can create a near impenetrable form of ice and crystalline structures. Then he opened the palm of his hand, and a glowing, intricate structure pooled from thin air. He handed it to Nezu, who marveled at the thing. See? I do indeed. With a flick of the hand, the small sculpture dematerialized, and behind a small pile of snow in the chimera's hand. I have my ghost sense, which is part of my ice core, but there's no other ghosts here, so can't exactly show you that one. Nezu nodded, pursing the lips spread over his snout. You're omitting something. There's another ability you have, and you don't like it. Danny froze, looking round with darting eyes. How do you know that? I have a very high IQ. Nezu acted like that was a sufficient explanation. Please don't feel ashamed or nervous. Whatever it is, you can't show me. I've seen some most seemingly villainous quirks turn out to be heroic. So rest assured, there's no judgment here. If you insist, Danny grumbled, unable to keep his growing nerves at bay. It's pretty destructive. Are you sure this block could be rebuilt? I'm positive. Nezu spoke cheerily. Go ahead, whenever you're ready. Danny planted his feet firmly in the cement below, turning towards the cluster of empty buildings. With a hearty inhale, he prepared himself for the most powerful of his abilities, core whirring in anticipation. He yelled an exhale, voice booming from his sight, forming glowing green sound waves in the form of a large cone. Before him, the cement buildings crumbled, caving in as the pure, deathly, agonizing sound erupted from his lungs. After a moment, too, Danny was completely out of control. The power zapped from him. His noise burst forth against his will. He fell to his knees, the feeling of his transformation washing over him as his yell finally faded. He grabbed his temples, groaning and hunching over in pain. Danny, are you alright? As you asked, though he didn't really sound concerned, no, he sounded enraptured, completely in awe of the raw power of the whale. Danny swallowed thickly, turning to look at Nezu with a sheen of unshed tears covering his eyes, blurring his vision. He wiped them away with the heel of one of his hands before shrugging weakly. He tried to stand, only to fall back to his knees, supporting himself on shaking hands. A little help here, Danny rasped, voice raw and sore. Nezu was already tapping the watch he was wearing. Within moments, Aizawa was running to block the direction of the school. You should go rest. We have a lot to do next week, Nezu said determinedly with a small nod, eyeing Danny once more before turning and skittering away. He passed Aizawa wordlessly, the teacher running over to Danny. Kid, what happened? Aizawa was kneeling before Danny in a few moments. One of my abilities, Danny groaned, shaking his head to clear it. It takes a lot out of me. Do you need me to bring you to recovery, girl? Aizawa's voice was quick and clipped, anger no doubt towards Nezu swimming in it. No. Danny breathed the word out, struggled to get to his feet with Aizawa's aid standing on weak legs. I'm not hurt, just exhausted. Can we go home? It was strange, calling Aizawa's apartment home, but it was the closest thing he had to it at the moment. So he would embrace the change wholeheartedly. They had plans to go shopping for some essentials for Danny the next day, which did go smoothly enough. Aizawa insisted on buying him an entire wardrobe, of which Danny mostly brought dark clothes or muted colors and long sleeves. He acquired a plethora of scars over the months of fighting, mostly up and down his arms, and he wanted to keep them hidden. After them buying toiletries, the two made their way back to the apartment, which Aizawa was hastily packing in order to move to a roomier 2-bedroom. The day of the entrance exam, Danny was told to stay home and relax. He, of course, did not do that. As soon as Aizawa locked the door from the hall, Danny flew through the wall and towards the UA testing center, following visibly the teacher's dark figure through the street from above. We both arrived at the school. Danny surveyed the grounds from above, deciding on a whim to watch the exam in Battle Center B. There was a lull before kids began heading towards the doors of the city block, Danny sitting invisibly atop one of the buildings all the while. As soon as the test began, the group of applicants ran into the arena, picking off robotic villains one by one. There were so many different abilities, so many teens yearning to make it into the prestigious school. Danny watched in awe as the foe villains fell over and over, as powers ranged and grew. Just as time was running low, a loudmouth hero of a teacher announced that there was a looming, booming sound, smoke wafting into the air. Danny turned to the new robot, mouth falling open, as he looked at its massive structure and power. Immediately, kids began to run. Despite the amazing abilities, Danny could not think that any one of them could take on such a beast. Something inside him snapped, focused suddenly on a girl who was trapped beneath a piece of rubble. Without thinking, any concern of being caught or anything, Danny dove down invisibly into the turmoil, heading for the girl in hopes of phasing her through the concrete she was trapped below. Before Danny could get to her, however, a green-haired boy zoomed past them, jumping high and fast into the air. Danny turned in the open air to stare as this boy flew toward the massive robot, fist at the ready and coursing with red veins of power. He punched the artificial villain in the head. The entire robotic thing crumpled, falling back and now in pieces. Danny stared, mouth agape, eyes wide at the raw strength of the move. What he missed, however, right away, was the boy falling at high velocity right for the ground. When he finally realized what was happening, it was too late. And he was too far away from the kid. He was too close to the ground. He was going to make an impact. He was going to die. Out of nowhere, the girl, for once before, rose up on a floating piece of robotic rubble, slapping the green-haired boy in the face. Immediately, Danny thought it was a cruel act, but soon enough realized what she'd done. She saved him, using her power, her quirk, to float him gently from the ground. Danny's protective obsession was dangerously triggered. Core hurting in his chest, however, he forced himself to fly away because he knew if he had stayed any longer or went to any other exam sites, he would lose it and do something to endanger himself or Aizawa. When he returned to the apartment he now called home, He's transformed back to his human form, collapsing to his knees and shuddering out a rancid sob. He was set to start his training with Nezzy later that day, and he couldn't want to go any less. Everything around him felt like pinpricks, overstimulation coursing through him like poison. Invisible ants crawled all over his skin, and he found himself dry heaving. It wasn't long until Aizawa got back from the exam, running Danny on the floor in the entryway. "Shit, kid." Aizawa surged forward, kneeling, not daring to touch Danny, which he was grateful for. "What happened? What's going on?" Danny, deciding not to talk about the entrance exams, instead rattled on about his obsession. "I know. I need to pretend, but I can't." "Slow down, Danny," Aizawa prompted. "Why can't I be cruel?" Danny sobbed. "Somebody else has to deal with this. Just come on, please. I don't feel like why me? What did I do to deserve this?" "Can I hold you?" Aizawa asked, voice scarce, almost not there. "Please," Danny whimpered, finally ready for touch again. Aizawa complied, wrapping surprisingly strong arms around him and hugging tight. Danny found himself, arms thrown around the hero's neck, face nuzzled into the black fabric at his shoulder. They stayed there a while, and at some point Aizawa had started rocking them back and forth very subtly. It was enough to calm Danny down to the point where he could form coherent thoughts, though he was still unable to control his obsession. He pulled back and sat down on the floor across Aizawa. The underground hero let go and did the same, both facing one another. "Let's figure out how we can beat this," Aizawa decided, more than suggested. "Nezzy told me today you'd start training. Could that be helpful?" Danny shrugged, pulling his knees up to his chest and hugging them gently. "I don't know. I'll talk to him." "Okay." Danny looked at me. He didn't know he'd stopped, but Danny did look back to Aizawa, who wore his concern clumsily, as though he wasn't used to doing so. "What?" Danny finally asked, trying to keep the instinctual body tone out of his voice. "Screw this. Let's find you a crime to stop." Danny perked up at that, his mouth falling into a small O shape as his eyes went wide. Wait, what? I can't see you like this, Aizawa reasoned. So if you really need a fix while we're working on making a better plan, then go. I'll take responsibility with Nezu. He'd be told twice, disappearing from the visible spectrum in an instant. I won't let you down, Danny exclaimed before zooming out of the apartment. He stopped a mugger, he stopped an arsonist, and even stopped a villain proclaiming to be the next all for one, or whatever that meant. Somehow, Danny was able to stay invisible the entire time, though the effort did do some work on him. By the time he was back at his new home, he was exhausted and giddy, the dichotomy thrilling. How'd it go? Aizawa asked when Danny flew through the far wall. He was in the kitchen, sipping a cup of hot tea and reading something on his laptop. It felt so good, Aizawa. Danny beamed, transforming back to his human form and landing on the floor. Thank you, really. Looked like you were careful, too. Aizawa snorted as he spoke. Danny cocked his head to the side, silently wondering what he meant. The other man turned his computer towards Danny, and he half read the title of the article on the screen. New invisible vigilante, more efficient than pros. Oh, is this bad? Danny asked. Not necessarily. Aizawa smirked, those words, turning back to the screen, back towards himself. Just keep staying under the radar and we should be okay. Later that day, Danny's training sessions with Nezu began. Despite the chimera keeping his cards close to his chest, Danny could tell he knew something about his vigilante escapades. It was an unspoken rule not to talk about it, however, so neither of them did. Danny quickly found that Nezu's training techniques were far more aggressive than Sam and Tucker's had ever been. It was fine, it was just exhausting. By the end of the week, however, he'd been able to increase his speed a few percent, strengthen his ectoplasmic powers, and even get farther in duplicating himself. Soon enough, he'd be able to do it with no problem. It was amazing, and Danny felt like this was where he was supposed to be, in spite of the heartache of leaving Amity Park, his friends, and his family. The weekend before the first day of school came way too quickly. That same weekend, Aizawa and Danny moved into the new two-bedroom apartment, despite Danny nearly begging to wait until school started. You won't have time to move, what with your studies when school starts. Aizawa snarked, earning a snort from Danny. Yeah, okay, at least I don't have to keep up a ruse like at home. At the mention of Danny's parents and previous living situation, Aizawa tensed, clearly uncomfortable with the topic. He knew how the elder man felt about his parents, that they were inattentive, neglectful, and bordering on abusive. Maybe he was right, but Danny tucked that away for a later date, because he was about to start school. For the first time since he can remember, he was thrilled to do so. And, well, that amazing fic was the second chapter to Landing. Next time, we will read chapter 3, Testing the Limits. Have a great day, drink water, eat food, and do not do anything illegal, unlike Danny. Till next time, goodbye.